Thanksgiving used to feel like a warm quilt in our house, threadbare in places, sure, but stitched together by habit and gravy. When I was little, I believed that traditions were stronger than people, that a calendar could keep a family from unraveling. Now, at 32, I know better. Traditions are bones, and people are the sharp knives that pry them apart. My name is Mara. I am the youngest of three, which, in the mythology of our family, meant I was the one who turned out tender. My mother used that word the way some people use stupid. Tender, she'd say, pursing her lip as if she'd tasted something sweet but disappointing. Tender like undercooked chicken. Mom is Evelyn, stone earrings and a perfume that smells like mint and cigarettes. Dad is Daniel, an ex-high school band teacher who can still pick out harmonies from the next room and who taught me that an apology should sound like a full chord. Not one lonely note. There's my older sister, Celeste, who carries our mother in her walk like a baton in a marching routine, and my brother, Aaron, who used to be my co-conspirator until he learned to measure his worth in corporate bonuses and steak dinners. If you ask my Aunt Lorraine, there's also the shadow family, which is what she calls everyone we keep around us, so that from the outside we look bigger than we are. Cousins who show up for free food. Paige and Nolan and all those photogenic boyfriends with their perfect haircuts. And Grandma Yvette, who doesn't say much anymore but is always listening like a houseplant with eyes. The story begins 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, at a Sunday dinner that I agreed to host because I'm the only one with an oven that doesn't sputter and die when it sees a turkey. My apartment is small and delicate as a teacup. But I make room by pushing furniture against walls and convincing lamps to do double duty. I was rolling out pie dough when Celeste barged in, a gust of perfume and a beige coat that cost enough to feed a small family. "You started without me," she said, looking at the dough like it was a dead animal. "I asked you to be here at 2. "It's 4, I said. "The apples don't peel themselves." Celeste fluffed her hair at the mirror I keep by the door. "Well, if you'd bought pre-made crust like I told you, if I wanted a crust that tasted like cardboard, I would do that." She turned, fixing me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You're so precious about the way things taste. It must be nice to put your heart where your stomach is." Mom was behind her, tisking at the lack of tablecloth. "Mara, the table looks naked. Where is the runner I gave you?" "The one with the falling leaves. I used it last year, and you said it was tacky." "I said the lighting was unforgiving," she corrected, swanning toward my kitchen island as if it were a stage. "Where's the nutmeg? My God, do you always live in this much quiet?" "I like quiet," I said. "It keeps me from saying things I'll regret." Dad was last, moving slower than usual, his hands slipping along the doorframe. He'd had a small stroke in early spring, small enough that he'd made a joke about it afterward, but big enough that the joke stopped as soon as anyone else left the room. He smiled when he saw me. Real, like a sunrise. "Hey, kiddo." "Hi, Dad," I said, and kissed his temple where his hair had gone thin. "Sit, I'll make tea." Aaron arrived late in a suit he insisted he just hadn't had time to change out of. And his girlfriend, sorry fiancée, Tiffany, followed, tip-tapping on heels that had never touched a sidewalk. The room felt crowded then, as rooms do when the air fills with unsaid things. We ate too much, which is the family way of leaving less room for conversation. The pie turned out good. Mom chewed, swallowed, and then gave me that half smile she keeps for when I've done something she can't dismiss. "Not bad," she said. "It's a bit rustic." "Rustic is in," Tiffany said, eager to help. "All the food blogs are doing rustic." "Thank you, Tiffany," Mom said, which is mom speak for "that will be all." It was after the dishes, when everyone was slouched and mellow, that the conversation turned to Thanksgiving. We rotate hosting like a chore wheel. 1 year, Aaron. Next, me, then Celeste. Then Mom, when she's feeling benevolent or wants credit for an old recipe she tore out of a magazine. This year, according to the accidental rhythm we'd fallen into, was mine. "I was thinking we could do an early dinner," I said, looking at Dad because he's the only one who nods before he hears what you're about to say. 2 o'clock. That way you don't have to drive in the dark." "Smart," Dad said, and his voice did that gentle bell thing, like he meant it. "What are we thinking for the menu?" I'd already planned a turkey with an herbed butter under the skin, wild rice stuffing with pecans, roasted carrots with cardamom and orange, an apple fennel salad to cut through the fat, cranberry relish with ginger, and 3 pies because pie must never be singular. Food is my language. I want you to feel held when you eat in my home, whether you like me or not. But before I could unspool any of that, Celeste cleared her throat. Actually, she said, and it was the kind of actually that curdles milk. We were going to talk to you about Thanksgiving. Talk to me. I asked, even though my stomach already knew the answer and had begun its slow clutching. Aaron folded a napkin into a football, like we were 8 again. We were thinking it might be simpler to do something different this year. Different? How? I said. Tiffany placed a hand on Aaron's forearm as if to steady him for impact. We found this amazing place, she said, eyes shining. The Maple Gates it's in the Berkshires. They do a farm-to-table Thanksgiving dinner, 6 courses, wine pairings, a cranberry cocktail with rosemary smoke. Smoke? Dad said, amused. What are we, salmon? It's very curated, Celeste said, which I know translates to expensive. We thought it could be nice to not, cook. You work so hard, Mara. I felt my face go hot with that specific blend of embarrassment and anger that shows up when someone pretends to gift you your own sacrifice. I like to cook, I said. I already started planning. I have a turkey ordered. Mom waved a hand. Oh, let's not be slaves to poultry. Besides, your grandmother doesn't like the stairs here. And Aaron's condo is too modern, no soul land. My place is being painted. She said that last part like she'd just remembered the excuse and was proud of how neat it was. It's just 1 year, Aaron said, because he has always been capable of minimizing my feelings to the size of a pea. We'll be back here next year, right? Sure, I said, even though I know how just 1 year becomes remember how great that was. And then suddenly a decade goes by and the only thing you're cooking is an argument. Dad cleared his throat. I like Mara's cooking, he said gently, and I like my chair. It molds to my broken places. Mom clicked her tongue. Dan, don't be dramatic, she said, then turned to me. Sweetheart, it's nothing personal. We're trying something different. You can still make pies if you must. If I must, I repeated. She sighed. You know how you get? How do I get? Tender, I suppose. So tender that everything feels like a bruise. I said okay, because I've learned that no one hears no from me unless it's followed by a tantrum. And I am too old for those. And also because the resistance in my chest felt like a hot knife and I didn't want to cry in front of Tiffany, who would probably press a napkin to my cheekbone and call it a moment. After they left, Dad lingered, his coat on but unbuttoned, looking smaller than he used to. Kiddo, he said, we can tell them no. We can make our own Thanksgiving here, just you and me. And invite anyone who'd rather have seconds than smoke in their drink. I laughed, though it came out jagged. They'll say I'm being difficult. Dad's eyes softened. Then be difficult. It's a good look on you. But the next morning he called to say that Mom had already booked the Maple Gate in non-refundable deposit, of course, and that they were making a weekend of it, driving up Wednesday, coming back Sunday. We'll do something when we get back, he said quickly. A leftovers Thanksgiving. A second chance. Second chances are a family specialty with the fine print that the first attempt doesn't get acknowledged at all. I said sure and hung up. And then I did the thing I always do when I feel powerless. I cleaned. I scrubbed the rings from around the sink like they were insults. I emptied the fridge of anything that had become a science experiment. I rearranged the spice cabinet so the cumin and the coriander stopped pretending they were the same thing. That should have been the end of it. They'd go, I'd sulk, and we'd find our way back to normal, whatever that meant. But families, like storms, build slowly, gathering the small wins into something bigger. A week before Thanksgiving, I took Dad to his follow-up appointment. Mom was tied up with the remodel, which is to say she was telling contractors how to do their jobs while they nodded and made their own private plans. I parked in a space that was too narrow and sat in a waiting room that smelled like old paperbacks. Dad squeezed my hand when they called his name. You don't have to come in, he said, if you'd rather catch up on work. I'd rather catch up on you." He smiled at that, the way people smile when they want to believe you. When the doctor came in, Dad pretended he didn't need help remembering the questions he'd written on the back of an envelope. I waited until the doctor left to ask, "Are you scared?" "Usually," he said cheerfully. Honest. But it's a quiet kind of scared. Like waiting to see if the last piece will fit in a puzzle you've been working on all day. On the drive home, we took the long way so we could pass the river. The trees were almost bare by then, their branches like hands. Dad turned the radio down and said, "You know, Marzipan, I keep thinking about your grandmother's table." "Grandma Yvette's." He nodded. There was always a place for someone who didn't warn they were coming. She'd say, "We feed whoever shows up hungry." That was her religion. I could make an altar to that, I said. Carbs and mercy. Dad laughed softly. Maybe that's what we need. Less curated. More mercy. He coughed one of those dry, unconvincing coughs, and I tried not to listen to the sound of it, tried not to attach it to the list of things my siblings don't have time to notice. By the time I dropped him off, the November dusk had done that trick where it fell too fast, and the house, with its bare porch light and its mail slot stuffed with flyers, looked like a face in need of sleep. Mom came outside as I was helping Dad up the steps. She had paint on her hands, a color she would later call bone, though to me it looked like regret mixed with water. "Mara," she said, and kissed the air near my cheek. "We're thinking of taking 2 cars for the trip, in case your father gets tired. So can you come by on Wednesday morning to help me pack his things? He'll forget his neck pillow." "Sure," I said, because no one says no when the request is cloaked as concern for someone you love. She looked down at the bag I was carrying. "What's that?" "Groceries," I said. "I'm making a pot pie tonight, and I brought the extras you like. The peas, the pearl onions." Mom's mouth softened for a moment. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. "You make a meal into a memory." Then, as if she'd said too much, she added, "Don't oversalt it." "You always oversalt." That night, cutting butter into flour. I thought of Grandma Yvette's table with the mismatched chairs. The dent in the 4th spoon from the little cousin who liked to drum. People weren't better then, they were just more honest about their disappointments. If my uncle drank too much, he did it at the table, and my grandmother put water in his wine glass and dared him to notice. If someone was mad, everyone else made room for the feeling. They didn't curate the mess. They passed it around until it grew smaller by portion. I decided to host a Thanksgiving anyway. Not a rival dinner. I don't like competing against people who aren't actually in the room, but a place-setting kind of promise to myself. I texted Aunt Lorraine, who taught me to swear gently and to keep a secret. "If you're not booked for the Berkshires nonsense," I wrote, "I'm roasting a bird. Open door." She called me immediately. "Baby," she said, "you know I only go where the food has sold. If you cook, I show up." "What time?" "2," I said. "Text me your list. I'll bring yams the way your grandmother liked M with a mercy of marshmallows. And I'll bring Nana. They'll leave her behind otherwise and call it a kindness." I laughed, and it felt like a stretch after sitting too long. "Okay, good. It'll be small." "Small is a word people use when they mean real," she said. "Love you." I told myself I wasn't competing with a 6-course wine-paired trees-are-watching-you resort dinner. I told myself I was honoring my grandmother's table and my father's quiet. But every time I imagined the Maplegate Inn, with its herringbone floors and its servers who pronounce herb with an audible H, I felt the old habit rise up, proving myself with produce, frosting over resentment with buttercream. I don't like that I need to win. I like even less that I learned it from Mom on Tuesday. I went to the market and did the best kind of math. How many pounds of turkey per person? How long it takes for potatoes to turn tender in salted water? How much butter is generous without making anyone confess to a cardiologist? I bought cranberries that popped between my fingers like punctuation. I splurged on a bottle of maple syrup because I'd figured out my recipe for cornbread dressing a week earlier. And it demanded that sweet, dark kiss. I carried it all home like contraband joy. Wednesday morning, I went to my parents' house with a packing list for Dad. Warm socks. The sweater that doesn't itch. His book of crossword puzzles. The photo of Grandma he keeps in his nightstand as a talisman. Mom was in the dining room, standing over paint swatches the way generals stand over maps. "Put Dan's things in this," she said, handing me a small roller suitcase. "And make sure he brings his vitamins. The inn probably has dreadful pillows." Dad was in the bedroom, struggling with a button on his shirt. I fixed it for him, and he looked at me with that grateful dignity he's perfected since the stroke. It's the kind that says, "Thank you for making me feel like a person, not a task." "I'm thinking of making your mother stuffing," he said, as if we were still having our own Thanksgiving. "The one with the sausage." "Save it for Sunday," I said. "We'll have a whole second round. Just you and me and whomever else stumbles in." He nodded, trusting me the way only someone who's seen you survive adolescence can. "Second chances," he said again, like a prayer. When everything was packed, Mom shepherded him toward the car like she was moving him through airport security. I hugged him, smelling his aftershave and the linen of his shirt that had been ironed halfway to crisp. "Text me when you arrive," I said, "and don't let them smoke your drink." He laughed. "Love you, kiddo." Mom leaned in for an air kiss that missed me entirely. "Don't oversalt," she repeated, though I hadn't said anything about cooking. As they pulled away, I stood on the porch and watched the car shrink. The November sky was the gray of wet wool. I thought, okay, we can do this. I can be the kind of person who makes a holiday out of whatever shows up. I can be the daughter who loves without needing a seat assignment. The rest of that day was chopping and brining, measuring and tasting. My apartment turned into a kitchen orchestra, and I was every section, the hiss of butter in the pan, the drum of the knife against the cutting board, the strings of rosemary and thyme tied together with kitchen twine. I made cranberry relish that tasted like a dare. I baked cornbread until the whole place smelled like a story you tell yourself when you're lonely. I set the table with the runner Mom had given me, the falling leaves one, which suddenly felt right, like acknowledging that sometimes things drop away, but we catch them. Press them between pages, keep them as proof of what we're capable of releasing. I put Grandma Yvette's dented spoon at the head, a private joke between me and the dead. At night, after washing the last bowl, I stood in the doorway to my own small dining room and tried to imagine it full. In my mind, Aunt Lorraine laughed so loud the utensils rattled. Grandma said something perfectly true and slightly cruel. Dad went quiet in that way of his, when he's content, humming under the racket like a bass line. For a minute, I believed it would all be fine. Then my phone buzzed. A group text. "Maplegate is magical." From Tiffany, with a photo of an arm holding a cocktail in a glass that looked like it had been designed by a sad wizard. "Wish you were here," Celeste added, which is the kind of lie she tells to avoid the harder truth that they don't. And that if they did, they would have made room rather than making reservations. One typed and deleted, typed and deleted. And then put the phone face down on the table and went to bed with my hair smelling like onions and victory. Thanksgiving morning, I woke early, the way you do when you've committed to a feast. The turkey went in first, a heavy hope. I basted on schedule. I made the mashed potatoes in a Dutch oven big enough to bathe a cat. I set the rolls to rise and thanked every god I don't believe in for yeast. When the timer dinged, the butter bubbled over the edges of the pan and made the house smell like applause, I felt something untie in my chest. I checked my phone. No message from Dad yet. The last bubbles of their drive, I assumed the mountain roads. I texted Aunt Lorraine a heart and a carrot emoji, our secret signal, and she wrote back, "Running late." Nana is in a mood. Save us seats. I laughed into the steam over the gravy. Save us seats, I said to the room. Of course. At 1:30, everything was ready. The table gleamed. I put out the small things that make a meal feel like church. A tiny dish of softened butter with a swirl like a galaxy. A sprinkle of flaky salt in a bowl my cousin made in kindergarten. A jar of pickles that snap when you bite. I poured water into the glasses because water means we're not going anywhere. It means we expect to stay. 2:00 came. I told myself they were parking. 2:10. I told myself the elevator at Aunt Lorraine's building had broken again. Because it always breaks on holidays. Like it knows a dramatic entrance when it sees one. At 2:15, the turkey sang when I touched it with the thermometer. At 2:20, the potatoes were the texture of every good memory I've ever had. At 2:30, the doorbell didn't ring. My phone didn't T-buzz. The steam off the gravy was less a hymn now than a whisper. I texted Aunt Lorraine, all good. Need me to pick you up? No answer. I called. It went to voicemail. I pictured them in a cab, Grandma railing at the driver for taking the long way, and I smiled even as my mouth tasted like a lie. By 2:45, the plates on the table looked like empty faces. I walked back and forth between the kitchen and the dining room like a shuttle in a loom, trying to weave myself back together. At 3 o'clock, still nothing. I thought of the maple gate in the sixth course, the rosemary smoke, the sound of people laughing at each other's curated stories. I thought of Dad, his careful smile, and a sour fear bloomed. What if he was there and he wanted to be? What if I had made up a seat for him at my table and he had chosen a different one? My phone rang then. It was Mom. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart, she said. And there was clinking in the background like a jewelry box being shaken. We just finished, though. What is it, Tiff? The amuse-bouche. So amusing. How was your day? I swallowed. Fine, I said. Are you with Dad? He's resting in the room, she said. He overdid it with the bread, I think. I tamped down panic. He didn't text me. Oh, Mara, she said, and now there was the smile in her voice. The one she uses when she knows something I don't. Didn't Aaron tell you? Plans changed. Lorraine decided last minute to join USA. She got a deal, and your grandmother is, well, she's perfectly happy in the lounge. There are these charming blankets. Everyone's here. I looked at my table at the 3 pies cooling like promises. Everyone. She didn't hear the way my voice broke on the word. Yes, yes, she said. Isn't that nice? We'll do a second round on Sunday. Don't oversalt the leftovers. Kisses. The line clicked dead. My kitchen was suddenly too loud with the silence in it. I stared at the phone like it might cough up a different ending. Everyone's here, except me. I set the phone gently on the counter. The way you place a fragile thing you don't want to break even though it already has. I wiped my hands on a towel that was too clean for how messy I felt. A tremor started in my knees and climbed. I went to the table and stood at the head where I'd put Grandma's dented spoon. The chair there looked theatrical. It's like something a person would sit in to make a speech or to be photographed at the height of their suffering. Okay, I said out loud to no one. Okay, I would not cry. I would not cry because tears felt like giving them something else to take. The clock ticked. Outside, somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Inside, every smell I'd coaxed into the air curdled into a single question that I didn't know how to answer. What am I, if not the person who fills the seats? There is a moment if you are the kind of person who makes holidays for other people. You have to decide if you are still a person without them. Standing alone in a room that smelled like hospitality, I understood that this, not the menu or the runner or the dented spoon, was the test. I straightened my shoulders. I adjusted a fork as if the angle mattered. I took a breath that hurt a little going in. We feed whoever shows up hungry, I whispered, hearing Grandma, hearing Dad, even if it's just me. And that is where I was, hands braced on the back of my chair. Heart beating a stubborn rhythm when the doorbell finally rang. The doorbell rang at precisely 3:07 p.m. I nearly dropped the carving knife I was holding. The sound so sharp in the silence that it felt like a hand gripping my chest. For a second I thought it must be Dad, that he'd broken away from the curated nightmare of Maplegate and taken a cab and decided to choose me. My heart thudded with something like hope. I wiped my hands on a towel, forced myself not to sprint, and opened the door. It wasn't Dad, it was Aunt Lorraine. Holding on to the sleeve of her mother, Grandma Yvetchu, was bundled in a coat 2 sizes too big. Lorraine looked frazzled, her lipstick smudged, her hair pinned haphazardly. "Happy Thanksgiving, baby," she said, breathless. We couldn't stomach it another second. "Thought we'd surprise you?" Grandma muttered. That place smelled like money and soup. I blinked, trying to keep the sting out of my eyes. "Come in, please. Come in." They stepped inside, and suddenly the apartment that had felt cavernous in its emptiness was alive. Lorraine sniffed the air and clapped her hands. Lord have mercy, it smells like a holiday in here. I pulled out chairs, made them plates, ladled potatoes like I was filling in the hole in my chest. Watching them eat, I felt steadier. This is what I had wanted. Just people at the table, forks scraping, laughter where it could fit. But the illusion didn't last long. By 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Celeste. Her name lit up my screen like a warning sign. I ignored it once, twice. On the third ring, Lorraine gave me a look. Pick it up, baby. Might as well face the storm. I swiped. Hello. Mara. Celeste's voice cooed. Syrupy and fake. We saw on Instagram you set a whole table. Did you really cook everything? For who? I glanced at the table, Lorraine rolling her eyes, Grandma chewing fiercely. For myself, I said, steady. Celeste laughed, loud enough that I could hear other voices in the background. My mother. Symphony. Maybe Aaron. Oh, sweetheart. That's so tragic. Did you light candles too? Pretend you were hosting Martha Stewart in your little apartment. The line of voices burst into laughter like a cruel chorus. My throat tightened. I wanted to hang up, but my mother's voice cut through. Mara, really? What were you thinking? Cooking a full Thanksgiving alone. It's pitiful. You should have joined us. We have so much here. Lobster bisque, roasted quail, the most divine Chardonnay. You're wasting your time with all that. Rustic nonsense. Rustic? That word again? Like a slap. I tried to breathe evenly. Dad said he liked my cooking, I replied. There was a pause. Then Aaron's mocking tone. Dad says a lot of things, Mara. He's probably just being nice. He doesn't even like turkey, remember last year? He said it was dry. That made my chest burn. It wasn't dry. He ate seconds. Another roar of laughter. Tiffany chimed in, her voice dripping with false pity. Oh, Mara, don't take it personally. You're just not really the hosting type. You stress too much. It's desperate. You know? Lorraine slammed her fork down. Put me on speaker, she hissed. Listen, you ungrateful vultures, Lorraine barked. Your sister cooked a feast while you sit around sipping smoke out of glasses. You wouldn't know family if it slapped you. Shame on every single one of you. There was silence. Then Mom's clipped voice. Lorraine, you don't get to dictate how we celebrate. Grandma suddenly leaned toward the phone, her voice creaky but sharp. Evelyn, she said, using Mom's full name, your daughter made a table like mine. You remember mine? The one that held you when your husband drank too much and when your children were sick? The one that fed neighbors, strangers, anyone? This girl built it again, and you left her alone. That's shame. Not rustic shame. The silence on the other end was longer this time. I could picture them stiff in their curated chairs, choking on their smoked rosemary. But then Celeste giggled, breaking the spell. Oh, Grandma, don't be dramatic. You always take Mara's side. Click! She hung up. The laughter had already scarred the moment. My face was hot, my hands trembling. Lorraine muttered, snakes, the lot of them. I sat down heavily at the table, staring at my untouched plate. All I could think was how they had cornered me, humiliated me from miles away. Like even in their absence, they'd found a way to drag me back into the role they'd written for me. The tender, the pitiful, the one with pies no one wanted. But then Grandma reached across, her frail hand gripping mine. Let them laugh, she whispered. The last laugh belongs to the one with a full table. I swallowed hard, the humiliation still raw. But beneath it, something else stirred, a quiet defiance, sharp and steady. And that was when the second doorbell rang. The second ring of the doorbell cut through the tension at the table like a blade. I froze, fork hovering over mashed potatoes I'd never taken a bite of. Lorraine raised an eyebrow, whispering, expecting someone? No, I said, my pulse skipping. Grandma Yvette muttered, could be the Lord himself, come to scold your mama. I half laughed, half choked, then pushed my chair back. My legs felt heavy, but my chest was wild, brimming with something I couldn't name: fear, hope, anticipation. I crossed the room, heart pounding in my ears, and opened the door. It wasn't Dad. It wasn't Celeste. It wasn't Aaron or even Tiffany with some empty olive branch. It was a man in a navy jacket, his hair dusted with November's chill. In his hand, he held a thin envelope. His eyes flicked to the number on my door, then to me. "Mara Lane," he asked. Yes, he handed me the envelope. "Delivery for you?" "Direct signature required." I scribbled my name, throat dry, and closed the door with the envelope trembling in my hand. Lorraine leaned forward, squinting. "What is it?" "A summons. Don't tell me your mother sued you for oversalting." Grandma smirked. "Open it, girl. Secrets don't like to stay." Sealed? I tore it carefully, hands unsteady. Inside was a letter, neatly typed. The header read the law office of Becker and Klein. My eyes darted over the first lines, as executor of the estate of Daniel Lane. This notice serves to inform you of a recent amendment to his will. Effective immediately. The words blurred. My lungs stopped working. "What is it?" Lorraine asked sharply. I swallowed hard. "It's about Dad," Lorraine repeated. I read aloud, my voice trembling, effective immediately. Mr. Daniel Lane designates his daughter Mara Lane as primary beneficiary of his personal estate and heirlooms, including but not limited to the family home, the antique instruments, and associated financial accounts. This amendment supersedes all previous distributions. The room went silent. Even Grandma, who never stopped muttering, looked stunned. "What the hell?" I whispered. Loren's face broke into a slow grin. "Well, I'll be damned. Your father gave you the crown jewels." But my mind spun. My father hadn't told me. He hadn't hinted. And why now of all days, when they'd all abandoned me to sip smoked cocktails in a curated inn? I sank into a chair, letter in hand, staring at the neat black type. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "It has to be." "No mistake," Grandma said firmly. "Your father sees. He always sees. He knows who carried him to appointments, who fed him soup when the others were too busy. He knows who sat with him when the silence got heavy." Lorraine clapped her hands once. "Oh, the others are going to choke on this like a bone in their quail. I can't wait to see their faces." But my stomach turned, because I knew my family cells, Aaron, even Mom. They wouldn't see this as Dad's gratitude. They'd see it as betrayal. And worse, they'd blame me. My phone buzzed again. A group call request. Their names all blinking on the screen. Loren's eyes gleamed. "Answer it, baby. Let's see the fireworks." Against every instinct I did. The screen split into faces. Symphony. Mom with her wine glass. Aaron smirking as though the whole world was his. "Mara," Mom started, her voice sugar-coated and sharp. "What was that phone call just now? The lawyer tried to reach me, but apparently he had something urgent delivered to you. Care to explain?" I felt my hands shaking, but I steadied my voice. It was about Dad's will. Their faces shifted. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Aaron leaned forward. Tiffany gasped dramatically. "What about it?" Mom demanded. I held up the letter. Dad amended it. I'm the primary beneficiary now. The house, the instruments, the accounts, they come to me. The silence that followed was thick, electric. Then Aaron exploded. "That's impossible. Dad would never do that. You probably manipulated him when he was sick." "Don't you dare," Lorraine cut in, her voice like thunder. "That man may be ill, but he's not a fool. He knew exactly what he was doing." Celeste sneered. "Mara. Primary beneficiary. That's laughable. What would you even do with it all? Turn the house into some sad little soup kitchen." Mom's face was the worst. Cold, tight, like stone cracking. "This is your doing. You've always been dramatic, always trying to guilt people into loving you. You poisoned his mind against his own family." I snapped then. The humiliation of earlier, the mocking laughter, the empty table lit, all boiled over. "I didn't poison anyone. I cared for him when you couldn't be bothered. I held his hand through doctor's appointments you skipped. I sat with him while you all pretended he was fine. Maybe he saw who really showed up. They flinched at that. Even Mom. Aaron's voice shook with anger. You won't get away with this. We'll contest it. Contest it all you want, Lorraine barked. But it's in writing. And I've got eyes and ears and a mouth big enough to testify about every selfish thing you people did. While Mara carried the weight, their faces twisted, danger, disbelief, desperation. And behind it all, fear. Fear that their curated little empire had cracked and the pieces had fallen into my lap. I hung up before they could spit more venom. The phone buzzed angrily on the table, but I ignored it. My hands still trembled, but this time the tremor wasn't from humiliation. It was from power. Lorraine raised her glass of water. To the tables that stay full, she declared. Grandma tapped her spoon against her plate. And to the truth that rings louder than the lies. I lifted my glass, the letter still clutched in my other hand. Outside, the November wind howled, carrying away the last of the daylight. Inside, I realized something. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving anymore. This was about justice. And the fight had only just begun. The phone didn't stop buzzing. First calls, then texts, then voicemails, all of them from my family, each more desperate than the last. I didn't answer. I sat at my table with Lorraine and Grandma, letting their voices from earlier echo in my head. Pitiful, rustic, tragic. And now suddenly, when Dad's will shifted in my favor, they remembered I existed. By 6 o'clock, the turkey was cool. The candles had melted into little pools of wax. And I was tired of listening to the device scream on the counter. Finally, I picked it up and typed into the group chat. Come here. If you have something to say it to my face. Lorraine's eyebrow shot up. Oh, baby. You sure? I nodded. My chest still trembled, but there was steel underneath. They think I'm too tender. It's too easy. They need to see what I look like when I stop apologizing. Grandma grinned toothlessly. That's my girl. At 7:15, there was a pounding at my doorknot. A pounding. Like they thought they could break it down with entitlement alone. I opened it before they could bruise the wood. Celeste pushed past me first, her beige coat sweeping like a storm cloud. Tiffany followed, clutching Aaron's arm as though she needed protection from the apartment walls. Mom came last, stiff-backed, her perfume sharp, her lips pressed tight. They looked around my dining room, the feast still on the table, the pies untouched, the candles burned low. For once, they weren't laughing. Well, I asked, folding my arms. Aaron slammed his hand on the letter that lay on the table. This is a joke. You think you can take everything? The house. The inheritance. You manipulated him. I met his glare. I took him to his appointments. I drove him when he couldn't see straight. I cooked for him, listened to him, sat with him when the nights got too long. If you call that manipulation, fine. I call it love. Celeste scoffed. Love. Don't make me laugh. You wanted sympathy points, always playing the victim. Something in me snapped. My voice rose, sharp as broken glass. You think I wanted to watch him stumble through words he couldn't find? You think I wanted to hear him cry when he thought no one could hear? You think I wanted to beg him to eat when Mom was too busy painting her walls and you were too busy posing for Instagram? No, I didn't want any of it. But I did it because he's my father. Because someone had to. The silence after my words was thick. Lorraine leaned back in her chair, smirking. Tell him, baby. Mom finally spoke, her voice cold and cutting. He's not dead yet. This letter doesn't mean anything until it's finalized. And I will not allow you to make a circus out of this family with your emotional theatrics. I laughed bitterly. You already made the circus. You just don't like that I finally got a seat in the ring. Aaron reached for the letter, but I snatched it back. Don't you dare touch what isn't yours. You don't deserve it. He shouted. I've worked my whole life for this family. I've made money, built a future, and Dad gave it to me. I interrupted, voice shaking with power. Not because of money. Not because of some curated performance. Because when he looked around for who actually showed up, I was the only one standing there. Celeste's face twisted. This isn't over. We'll contest it in court. Go ahead. I said, leaning across the table, my voice steady. Because then you'll have to stand before a judge and explain why you abandoned your own father on Thanksgiving. Why you mocked me while I was sitting alone at a table you couldn't be bothered to honor. Why the only ones who came to eat were the people you dismissed as irrelevant. Go ahead, I want you to contest it. Let the world see what you are. Lorraine clapped her hands slowly. Bravo. Tiffany shifted uncomfortably, her hand slipping from Aaron's arm. Maybe we should just let it go, Aaron. It's not worth the fight. He rounded on her. Not worth the fight. This is our inheritance. Her face hardened. Correction. It's hers. The crack in their united front spread like a fault line. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. Across the street, lights glowed in other homes. Families sat together, laughing, eating. I thought of how Isley mine could have joined me, how different this night could have been. I turned back to them. You left me alone today. You laughed at me. You called me pitiful. And now you want what my father gave me. You don't deserve the house. You don't deserve the instruments. You don't deserve his legacy. You deserve exactly what you gave me today. Aaron frowned. And what's that supposed to mean? I lifted the untouched pie from the table, set it in front of them like an offering, and said nothing. Absolutely nothing. The words hung heavy. Grandma chuckled low. Poetic justice. Aaron's face went red. Celeste grabbed her coat. Mom's eyes, sharp and furious, burned into me. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. Get out, I said. My voice was calm, final. This is my home now. My table? My family? Get out. They left, slamming the door so hard a frame rattled on the wall. The apartment was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of victory. Lorraine raised her glass. To the girl who finally found her claws. Grandma smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. To the one who fed whoever showed up hungry. I sat down at the head of the table, the dented spoon still waiting. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. Because tonight, I hadn't just hosted Thanksgiving. I had claimed my place. And the family that left me behind had finally been left behind themselves. When the door closed behind them, I sat very still. The turkey sat half-carved on its platter. The mashed potatoes had gone lukewarm. The pies lined up like little soldiers, still waited for someone to claim them. For a moment, I almost felt the weight of their absence pressing in again, like the ghosts of their laughter would seep back into the room. But then I looked around at what remained. Lorraine sipping from her water glass as though it were the finest wine. Grandma nibbling at the edge of a roll, humming an old hymn under her breath. And me still standing, still breathing, still here. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. That night, after Lorraine and Grandma had left with their coats buttoned tight and foil-wrapped leftovers under their arms, I stood alone in my apartment. I walked to the table, touched the runner with its falling leaves, and smoothed the wrinkle as if it mattered. For so long I had equated family with obligation. I thought my worth was measured in how much I could give them, how much humiliation I could endure, how tender I could remain no matter how many times they bruised me. But tonight taught me something else. Family isn't the people who sit in curated chairs and laugh at your pain. Family isn't blood that runs cold. Family is who shows up hungry and who feeds you when you're starving too. I had been starving for years, begging for scraps of affection, crumbs of approval. And tonight, with the ring of a doorbell and the stroke of a pen in my father's will, I finally saw the truth. I had never been empty. I had been full all along. They just chose not to sit at my table. On Friday morning, I boxed up the untouched pies and brought them to the community shelter downtown. A young volunteer with nervous hands asked if they were homemade, and when I said yes, his eyes lit up like I'd brought gold. People will love this, he said. Good, I told him. That's all I want. As I watched him carry the boxes inside, I realized something my grandmother had always known. Food isn't just nourishment. It's proof that we care enough to create, to share, to fill the empty spaces inside each other. And I decided then that my table would never be empty again. If my so-called family wanted no part of it, fine. There were plenty of people in the world who would. On Sunday, Dad called. His voice was tired but warm. "Kiddo," he said, "I'm sorry about Thursday." Your mother insisted. "Well, you know how she is." "I know," I said softly. "It's not your fault." There was a pause. Then his voice cracked. Did you get the letter?" "Yes," I whispered. He let out a shaky breath. "Good. I wanted you to. I wanted you to know I saw you, that you're not invisible. You've given me more than I can ever repay, Mara. This is the only way I knew how to say it." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you, Dad, for trusting me." "For believing in me," I added silently. Weeks later, I stood in front of the family home, the house with the creaky porch and the dented mailbox. Snow dusted the roof, and the yard looked bare without the summer roses. But it felt alive, waiting. Mine? I had the keys now. Not just to a house, but to a new beginning. A place where holidays could mean laughter without cruelty, where love wasn't rationed out like crumbs. When I stepped inside, the air still smelled faintly of Dad's aftershave. His chair was in the corner, molded to his shape. I touched it and smiled. "We'll make this place ours again," I whispered. "I promise." And I meant it. Sometimes, late at night, I think of that Thanksgiving, the one where they left me alone. The memory still stings, but I don't carry the shame anymore. Because shame belongs to them, not me. I imagine them at their inn, sipping their smoky cocktails, laughing at me in their curated little world. And then I picture myself hands deep in flour, sleeves rolled up, heart wide open, feeding whoever showed up hungry. In the end, the feast was mine. The legacy was mine. The truth was mine. And that's the justice of it. They left me alone, but in doing so, they freed me. Now, when the doorbell rings, I don't dread who might be standing there. I smile because I know my table will always have room, and I know exactly who deserves a seat. And that is how they left me alone on Thanksgiving, only to lose everything they thought they owned. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals create the clearest justice. Pause for effect if this story struck a chord with you. Don't forget to hit that like button. Tells me you want more stories of betrayal, revenge, and family secrets uncovered. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next tale. And in the comments below, tell me, have you ever been left out by the people who should have stood by you? I'm listening.